Hello, my name is Keith Olson, and this tape is a 70-minute presentation of a concept which I call Sykes. The tape is primarily in two portions. The first show, Sykes 1, deals with the basics of the concept. After a short introduction, the tape will detail the needs, the problems within society which give rise to the need for something like Sykes. Then we go into a presentation of the basics of the Sykes concept. From there we go into the advantages which would accrue from the use of Sykes and how Sykes would solve the problems which we listed earlier. We conclude the Sykes 1 presentation with a listing of the reasons why this is not only a hypothetically good idea, but something which would work very well in practice. The Sykes 2 presentation is a 25-minute listing of demonstrations, exhibits, and illustrations used to show how Sykes works in reality or would work in reality in a variety of different circumstances. The presentation was designed to be shown to a major Big 8 CPA firm. The idea was to get the firm interested enough to pursue the concept in order to build a more polished version of the presentation which you are seeing, complete with more studies, more details, more charts, graphs, and examples. Anyway, none of the Big 8 firms which I contacted would sign a non-disclosure statement. Therefore, I have chosen to send these tapes out to a select group of individuals in government and various other organizations. You are one of these individuals.
Progress. In the area of communications, it can be traced from carvings on stone several thousands of years ago. Standard characters emerged over the centuries, and books appeared during the Middle Ages. Gutenberg ushered in an entirely new era with the interchangeable type printing press. Webster standardized language in one of the country's most often used reference books. In other areas, too, standardization has been synonymous with progress. Sam Colt revolutionized manufacturing when he proved the potential of interchangeable standardized parts. Henry Ford went Colt one better when he standardized the builders of machines on his pioneer assembly lines. The Napoleonic Code was a very successful standardization of jurisprudence among other disciplines, and can be seen as a distant forerunner of the American Uniform Commercial Code. The accounting profession has shown significant tendencies towards standardization too, a trend which appears to be moving ahead rapidly. International organizations are promoting greater harmonization between accounting systems used by various countries. Our society is increasingly dependent on the numeric code as a data handling tool. The Social Security numbers used for many forms of identification, and the zip code, a very successful and well-accepted system, will be expanded to 9 digits soon. What's making the numeric codes so much more useful is the advancing technology of computers. This runaway revolution is itself in dire need of discipline in industry standardization, but it has made it possible to handle unbelievable numbers of numbers very easily. Sophisticated software packages are being used to help in analyzing numbers so as to better understand everything from medicine to astronomy to profits and gross national products. But there are problems with the new powers we've harnessed. Problems primarily with our ability to adapt our thinking to the requirements of the new technology. Our information handling infrastructure is badly in need of an overhaul. As the International Journal of Accounting puts it, in essence, accounting is a language, a means of recording and communicating information. As in all languages, unless the grammar and vocabulary are strictly defined, there's a serious danger of being misunderstood. Misunderstanding. The comparing of apples and oranges in this case. How much damage is done, and what can be done to reduce misunderstanding? We'll come back to what can be done shortly, but as for the damages from the imprecise use of language in describing elements of economic and financial information, I've arranged these problems by areas, beginning with the overall economy, which suffers because inaccurate, incomplete, and late data is often used to make decisions which are crucial to the well-being of the economy. This is true for the state and federal governments and for institutions like the Federal Reserve. Business is constantly planning by forecasts which are not as accurate as they could be if better data were available. The U.S. government suffers because of duplication of effort in data collection which is slow, expensive, and inefficient. And the data collected is error-prone and incomplete. The accounting profession suffers because different systems and codes between companies causes numerous problems. Accountants going to new jobs, for example, or CPA firms auditing new firms need to spend much time analyzing the ledger system of a new company before they can operate in that environment. Consolidations of companies requires much work to cope with differences in ledger systems between companies. International compatibility of procedures and conventions is made even more difficult since the basic procedures for gathering the data affect that data differently from one country to another. Industry has problems because it's difficult to compare results from one operation, company, or industry to another due to differences in categorizing data elements between the parties. And the software industry suffers because vendors must allow great flexibility in designing their general ledger packages because of the great variability of systems code architecture in use throughout the business sector. While it is difficult to quantify the damage done, let's consider how serious it is for the United States. We know of the vast bulk of information collected, analyzed, and disseminated by the U.S. government. We know of its importance to business, jobs, even our national security. In the highly interdependent, fragile economic infrastructure of the 20th century, having control, or any means of control, is impossible without having information. Where does the government get this vital information? How do they get it? Well, the Department of Commerce Handbook of Cyclical Indicators provides some indication of where data comes from. As you can see in this small sampling, many sources supply data. The methodology used is not always consistent from one source to another, and often the accuracy is questionable. Other data elements of potentially great usefulness are not examined because the techniques for handling the data are not even minimally reliable. It is becoming more and more evident that we have a problem with our information gathering infrastructure. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, has done some studies on this matter. Responses to their survey show, in the view of member countries, a lack of comparability of information or multiplicity of diverging standards represents substantial problems and costs to users of the financial accounts, as well as to the enterprises themselves. The following problems have been mentioned. In the absence of transparency of financial accounts, governments may experience difficulties in collecting information needed for macroeconomic policy purposes, as we spoke of. Actual and potential investors face additional expenses for the purpose of analyzing financial statements, and certain accounts may be misleading if underlying accounting policies are not clearly disclosed. More generally, continuing unreliability of financial information on companies was considered an impediment to the international flow of capital and investment. Some replies also mentioned social costs to employees, consumers, and the public at large, which result from a lack of transparency of financial accounts. The absence of comparable and reliable information frustrates the basic objective of the OECD guidelines on disclosure of information, which is to improve public understanding of the structure, role, and policies of multinational enterprises. Awareness of the problem in question is increasing worldwide. One follow-up point to the questionable practices of data gathering in the U.S. is the computer side of the story. As you can see, it's due to be improved upon, and none too soon. The upcoming activity in this area of the government's mechanism, whatever that activity is going to be, the fact that it's going to happen is very worth remembering. It will be a crucial factor in later considerations. Now, I'm sure that my introduction, centering as it has on the subject of standardization, followed by the recitation of a litany of problems, has you guessing at what my point is going to be. I have a solution for many of the aforementioned problems, and I call it SEICS, Standard Economic Information Communications System. The SEICS code is actually a string of code segments. Each segment must be designed to be the optimum balance between flexibility on the one hand, suggesting a preference toward more digits per segment, and efficiency on the other hand, suggesting a preference toward fewer digits per segment. The segments comprising the code in total are designed to allow for a systematic analysis of the most important economic activity on levels ranging from the international summary level to details of cost centers within particular company locations. At the company level, where the details which form the database are fed into the system, the SEICS code architecture serves as a guide to formatting the chart of accounts. The lower levels of the SEICS code are generally quite flexible. It's at the summary level, such as country, industry, company, and major account code, where rigid adherence to uniformity is necessary. Only certain industries would need to use standardized codes in some of the lower levels like minor account, major and minor center codes. At the governmental and international level, SEICS can be viewed as a universal library reference system, providing greatly improved data about vital economic information. The uniform summary-level codes can provide efficiency never possible before SEICS. Information about U.S. dollars or Japanese yen spent on various products and resources, expenses of everything from assembly lines to sales promotions to research and development, statistical data about employment, production, and consumption of raw materials, even next year's plan for the foregoing data, all can be analyzed more accurately than ever before through the use of SEICS. Government and business leaders who make the decisions which touch our lives so dramatically can greatly improve their batting average with this kind of data handling tool. The initial adaptation of the SEICS system should come from the U.S. federal government. This system, if used by the government's data processing systems, could make the wheels turn more smoothly for the government, even if not one corporation ever used the account code segments of the SEICS code internally. The government, through requiring industry to submit data to its processing centers, not necessarily maintain the data in that form yet, but just submit data to its processing centers in the SEICS format, could help speed widespread internal corporate use of SEICS account code segments. Tax incentives could also encourage industry participation. My rendition of the ideal SEICS code is really only a rough sample model. Some code segments may need to be expanded. Some new ones may need to be added. Various currently existing code systems may be appropriately included under the SEICS umbrella. These and other considerations must be given much thought before a code system is finalized, which will satisfy all of the diverse groups of people who have to use the SEICS system in order for it to attain its potential. Now, here's the prototype. The letters on the top line are representative of segments. For example, code AAA, which is the 3-digit country number, occupies the first, second, and third positions of the SEICS code. The code in its entire 49-character mass is represented just above the text. It should be mentioned immediately that no one code user would ever need to worry about the entire code, and most people using the code would only use a few of its segments at a time. Here's a closer view of the code, segment by segment. First, the country number. which identifies the nation in which the company in question is physically located. This part of the code would only become useful when international use of the system becomes a reality, and then only for very high-level analysis. Industry. The industry code configuration should be designed to allow the maximum efficiency in sorting of information in accordance with the most important needs of governments and businesses. I might mention at this point that a good case can be made both for and against the use of existing SEICS codes in this capacity. The company number. This is the number of the company to which information pertains. This 4-digit number is unique within industry code, so that each 4-digit industry code can have up to 9,999 company codes. The Sykes system should eventually be used by smaller businesses, so a range of company numbers within each industry should be reserved for various types of all other small companies. The data category indicator tells the system if the information pertains to book, tax, both book and tax, statistics, or plan. A cross-check on the denomination unit type code reduces the possibility of confusion here. This is one of the many cross-checks which are possible in the system. This digit is a very powerful tool, and therefore it must be carefully controlled. Which industries will report for which data category will be the subject of much study and probably political negotiating. Some industries, for example, would probably be required to submit some plan data if they are heavily involved with governmental contracts or if they are very key elements of the economy. But most other companies would not be required to submit plan data, I would not imagine, and likewise with statistics information. Some types of industries would be required to submit this data just as they are now. They would only submit it more efficiently through Sykes, but the point is it's a very fine line which must be drawn between companies which should submit and should not, and this little chart here does not indicate that all companies will have to submit plan or statistics data, for example. We've now come to the major account code. This is the most crucial segment of the code. The 4-digit major account code is designed to be a universally applicable summary-level chart of accounts. The first digit indicates basic account category, and the remaining 3 digits lend further detailed breakdown capabilities to any given category. Categories 1, 2, and 3, for example, are balance sheet accounts. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are P&L accounts. This architecture is designed to provide the most efficient and simple analysis of results by GAAP. Following the major account code are 3 more segments which further describe the nature and location of the subject of journal entries or ledger accounts using the code. These segments are the minor account, the major center, and the minor center, one or more of which may be unnecessary and left blank in any given situation. The point is that the major account code, the one we're talking about here, is further defined by additional code segments where necessary. The major account code is thus freed to be of a sufficiently summary nature that it can be uniform within industry while still allowing enough flexibility to accommodate the needs of any and all potential users. I will briefly run through the major account code prototype, allowing viewers to scan the contents. The specifics are subject to revision in future phases of Sykes development. This is a sort of a generic private industry example. Each industry could have its own unique Sykes chart of accounts, differing from the generic chart that you're seeing here by reflecting whatever characteristics of the industry are special and peculiar to that industry. Government would, of course, have its own Sykes major account code systems tied together as much as possible, but all under the Sykes umbrella. The point is, what you're looking at here is A prototype, again, something meant to symbolize the generic chart of accounts, which would be put together by a major CPA firm based on its years and years and years of experience in all sorts of different industries. Constructing these charts of accounts, these generic charts of accounts for various industries, will be one of the most demanding and time-consuming aspects of completing the SEICS program. And we've now come to the minor account code. The minor account code provides a further breakdown, as we mentioned, of major account code information. The numbers are unique by major code within industry. In other words, a given 4-digit major code may mean different things between industry types, as we said. And likewise, a given 4-digit minor code can mean different things between different major codes. Some major codes will not need further breakdown by a minor account code, and in those cases it may be useful to employ the available minor code numbers to carry information on a variety of other matters. For example, the minor codes in the owner's equity major code segment area could be used to represent the nationality of the ownership of a company rather than its physical location. Examples of this are provided in the SEICS 2 presentation, by the way. The major center code is the number of any independent company location. This can be a plant, a store, a sales office, research center, or administrative department. The number is tied to tables, which can be different for internal versus external reporting, which indicate the physical location of the reporting entity. It may be necessary to allow more digits for this code, but it's also possible to allow users as many digits as desired and still use only 4 digits in the SEICS code itself, as long as the tables translate the company's code to the SEICS location code format. Again, we'll go through this and most of these other segments in example format in the SEICS 2 presentation. The minor center code is useful for different things depending on what account code category it reports to or belongs to. For expense accounts, it can be a further breakdown within the major center code, as in a cost center within a factory. In sales account codes, the minor center number could be the geographical symbol code for the customer, if a selling company wanted to track its sales by geographical area. Other such uses could be accommodated by the minor center code, which can be seen as kind of a wild card. The denomination amount field. This is the actual information in US dollars or whatever currency is involved, for which all other code segments are merely references, adjectives, and addresses. This field also accepts statistical figures like tons produced or barrels used, as defined by switches and choices in the definitions of data category, major account code, and denomination unit type fields. The denomination unit type field defines whether the numbers in the NNN field, one we just looked at, refer to US dollars, Japanese yen, German marks, or currencies of whatever sort, or to barrels, tons, hours, or employees. In other words, this code would have sequences for currency denominations and other sequences for various statistical measurements. The balance type code. This digit indicates whether a SEICS code balance is a debit or a credit. The nature of the balance type is the result of an automatic netting of all balances encompassed by a particular SEICS code. Some SEICS segments need to be rigidly standardized. Segments like country code, industry, major account, and unit of denomination codes have to be universal among SEICS users for the purpose of the system to be viable. On the other hand, many segments are partially flexible, As you have seen, the details of the chart of accounts are determined by companies themselves internally. Only the Sykes framework affects how the accounts are created and used at a detail level. Sykes cannot directly and completely eliminate the problems of people using different criteria for deciding what account to book a given amount to. Differences in financial statement formats, meanings of various types of account titles, and many other more complex issues cannot be reconciled by the use of the Sykes system alone. But the logical discipline of the numerical codes can help by 1. Reducing confusion generally, and thus focusing more attention on remaining compatibility problems, and 2. Providing a more organized environment in which to define accounting differences, and thus better enable understanding of the effects of those differences. We now face 2 unresolved questions. 1. Is the Sykes concept viable technically? And 2. Is the Sykes concept viable in social-political respects? First, for the technical question. We have many software vendors with more coming all the time, and they have powerful systems capable of handling all necessary aspects of a system like Sykes, even if the number of digits should exceed the 49 digits in my prototype by some degree. One problem in the software industry is that the systems must be designed to handle as close to 100% of the account code systems in existence as possible. Now, this substantially increases the programming complexity of the packages, increasing simultaneously the cost, run times, downtime, and overall inefficiency. A stable, standardized code system like Sykes will someday soon be a key ingredient in reducing confusion within the software industry. In other words, we do have the technical ability in the area of hardware and software to handle Sykes. In fact, the advent of Sykes can enhance our technical prowess. The second question was, is the Sykes project viable in social-political terms? First, let me go over my prototype implementation strategy. 1. The project is undertaken by a CPA firm and the initial study is begun. The project scope is examined and finalized. Research is conducted into all relevant areas. If the CPA firm is interested in software implications, this would be a logical time to do preliminary work in systems design, or perhaps a software company should be called in. Analysis of the best conversion plan approach is begun. Preliminary brainstorming on the subject of data transmission networks between Sykes user organizations is begun. 2. The initial study findings are presented to the U.S. government. Now, assuming an interest on the behalf of the government, this is what we have to generate, but the idea of Sykes and its applications would be routed around to all agencies in the government which would be involved. Coordination should be pursued also at this point with the FASB. This could be done prior to the idea being submitted to the government, but it's probably best not to broadcast the idea too much until some reasonable assurance is obtained of the CPA firm having a head start in soliciting the government contract to do the developmental work. 3. Presentation of the idea to potential international users of Sykes. Determine which other countries have an interest in being involved in the use of something like the Sykes code. From my studies, that would be a fair number. Many of them are looking for ways to increase compatibility in terms of accounting. B. Begin work on what steps will be necessary to work out any differences in requirements between potential Sykes users internationally. 4. Sykes is accepted and promoted by the U.S. government, the FASB. I think we could also count on some help from Wall Street and the banking community. Anyway, United States government incentives and disincentives are activated on a gradual, phased basis. The division of the CPA firm doing the project expands tremendously as companies rush to install Sykes ledger systems and packages. Other companies involved with this project begin to reap the rewards. Software vendors, communications companies, analysis companies, even the suppliers of business forms join in benefiting from the change to the Sykes system. The auditing profession spawns another limb in special purpose audits of company adherence to Sykes coding and classification regulations. The industry-leading CPA firm is the one which did the Sykes study and got the government contract to do the work. Plainly speaking, we can give politicians a way to look good, saving taxpayers' dollars and simultaneously increasing governmental effectiveness in the key area of guiding the economy. As industry becomes accustomed to submitting data to the government in the Sykes format, it will find the system more and more attractive for internal use also. I believe that within the next 10 to 20 years, the majority of large and medium-sized businesses in the U.S. will be following this path. A bold statement? Well, allow me to offer some support. The French have been working on a predecessor to Sykes for well over 30 years now. As noted by Kenneth Most, professor of accounting at Florida International University, in his book, which will be coming out this fall. In 1945, the Ministry of Finances and Economic Affairs set up a committee for the rationalization of accounting, whose task was to propose a national uniform system of accounts and to make recommendations for its application and utilization for the benefit of the national economy. The first National Chart of Accounts, or Plan Comptable Général, appeared in 1947, and in the same year, the committee was replaced by the Conseil Supérieur de la Comptabilité, charged with supervising the introduction of the plan. In 1957, the name of the body was changed to Conseil National de la Comptabilité. The chart was to be applied to all state agencies of an industrial or commercial type, of which nationalization had created a good number, and in mixed enterprises, those firms in which both public and private interests participated. The chart was accompanied by a model balance sheet and profit and loss account, together with detailed instructions for the operation of the accounting system and the preparation of period financial statements. A series of ministerial orders applied the chart, with modifications of detail in each case, to government agencies, public enterprises, and firms operating with state backing or subject to state control. Initially, in other words, private industry was only peripherally involved. A decree of 1962 revised the conditions under which the application of the second plan was to proceed and called for progress reports, the first of which was published in 1963. The report noted that the plan had been adopted by virtually all public enterprises, which is of course no surprise, and by a large proportion of the mixed firms. Remember, this is 15 years after they started working on it. While it was more difficult to draw firm conclusions concerning its application in the private sector, progress was satisfactory for a number of reasons. Fiscal laws had favored the adoption of the plan. Teachers had taught the form and contents of the plan to many who were now practicing accountants. And the intrinsic qualities of the plan had recommended it to many firms as both practical and convenient. As I mentioned before, when private industry gets used to submitting to the government information in this format, it will find it very convenient to use it internally as well. Once the unfamiliarity wears off and businessmen understand such a system, they use it willingly. The plan has been revised a second time in the Projet de Plan Comptable Général, published in 1979. A volume of nearly 400 pages. This is increasing in terms of its scope here. This publication contains a terminology, a detailed chart of accounts for both financial and cost accounting, and rules for calculating the elements of financial and managerial accounting reports. It also contains a simplified chart of accounts for small businesses. As you can see, private industry acceptance is widespread and growing. Even the smaller firms are increasingly involved in using standardized codes internally. Here is the simplified chart of accounts from the French system. It's worth noting here that the author, Professor Most, was forced to translate this work himself. The existence of the French, and for that matter the German, standardized account codes is not exactly a state secret, but very few people have appreciated the significance of the success of these codes. So, the French have been expanding the scope of their system, and industry is reported to be very receptive, as we've seen. How has it worked out for the French government? Economic planning has been used successfully in France, with the assistance of the Banque de France, which manages the monetary system. The national income accounts, which rely for much of their data on financial reports via their standardized codes, are an important planning tool. I might add that it is an important planning tool which this country does not make use of nearly as well as it could. But remember, even the French system lacks many of the other code segments of SEICS. Also, the role of computers in this area is really only beginning to be appreciated. Most of the successful implementation and use of standardized codes in France took place without widespread use of electronic data processing and transfer. The point is that a more advanced system, SEICS or one like it, is bound to appear, and soon. Here are the advantages which can be derived from the use of SEICS. For the government, better quality information, faster, cheaper, and more abundant, less expense for far better decision-making tools. For industry, compatibility of accounts across companies will make for easier consolidations and greater ease of gaining good accounting control over newly acquired subsidiaries. Easier and less expensive submission of data to the government. Overall increase in efficiency of accounting functions. Better data available to management. And reduced audit fees because of more organized audits. For the economy, greater knowledge of facts, enabling people from the government to the Federal Reserve to credit managers of small companies and speculative investors to make more educated decisions. Less wasted time and effort in record-keeping functions. For the accounting profession, easier transfer of skills from one job to another, greater ease of auditing. A new kind of audit will be needed, the code adherence audit. And a major call for accountants consulting services will arise by companies installing the new system. For the software industry, far fewer problems with structuring of financial reporting systems file architecture. As time goes on, this will be of incalculable value. One more advantage might be mentioned at this point, the advantage to the U.S. government of using the services of a CPA firm to spearhead a conversion to more standardized data collection, analysis, storage, and transmission. The French, for example, set up commissions comprised of people from many walks of life and many political persuasions. These commissions had a way of not getting the job done. You may remember back to the passage where we traced the evolution of the French system over more than 30 years and numerous name changes. How much faster could the U.S. get the job done using an efficient CPA firm with expertise in accounting systems of virtually all industries, hardware and software aspects of data storage, transmission, and analysis, auditing implications of a SEICS conversion, and international experience and political know-how? Could we do the job, defined as beginning with a government contract and ending up with widespread use of SEICS? Could we do this in 5 years, 10, 15? My guess is that it won't take much more than 10 years. Consider the rate of increase in the computer capabilities available to us at this time. Consider the frantic awareness within places like Congress that their data may be leading them into decisions which might cost them elections. Consider the potential for improvement within business, the accounting community, and the software industry. Consider the lessons which we can learn from analyzing the moves of the French and Germans in their pioneering work. I have to ask myself, who would really benefit from holding up our progress? Once the first inertia of moving a new idea is overcome, the work should proceed quickly. Individuals from government agencies, Congress, various sciences related to the economy and computers, and the FASB should all be involved in an advisory capacity. Congress should have the final say in any matter, since the system will undoubtedly someday in the far future be coded into law to a certain degree. Other potential players and their roles in the process remain to be cast. The central point is, however, that a Big 8 firm is the needed mechanical device to get the ball rolling and to keep its momentum going. We face another major question, though. Will the U.S. government be willing to entertain an idea such as the one I propose here? Well, consider this from the December 17, 1982 Kiplinger letter. How the government can save billions and run better is the subject of a series of recommendations that will be coming along. It's not just another task force with a high-toned final report that will gather dust at the White House. Reagan asked for these ideas and fully intends to follow through on a good share of these suggestions. Here are some of the recommendations. Turn more tasks over to private firms through bids and contracts. And this from the April 22nd, 83 Kiplinger letter. Government is contracting out for more services that it requires. A little further down, barriers to dealing with private firms are being chipped away. It's becoming clear that business can do the jobs as well and cheaper. The Reagan administration is eager to farm out some of its projects to the private sector, if it's productive to do so. What we need to do next is as follows. 1. Do many interviews and much in-depth study of the German and French standardized accounting systems. Some of the items to explore are: to what level of detail are codes standardized by industry, type, and size? What are the problems of converting to the standard codes? How long did it take? What benefits have been shown to result from the standardization? Are there plans to further use the uniform codes, linking them to areas which should be considered for our approach? 2. Analyze in depth the data elements which Sykes can supply to the government and how the flow of this data now takes place. What U.S. state and quasi-governmental, such as Federal Reserve organizations, use the data which Sykes can provide? How is this data currently collected? What is the time needed to issue a report in any given subject, from time of occurrence to time of reporting? What are the elements, politically, which can be useful or harmful to our getting the Sykes code speedily approved and used? What are the potential problems, like a lack of an in-place transmission facility to carry the coded information in the anticipated volume, which of course could be rather considerable? 3. What currently existing code elements can be adopted? The SIC code was mentioned earlier as one. There are many others. What should be the degree of flexibility allowed in higher-level code segments between industries or countries? 5. To what degree will various elements of the business community be affected by a change to Sykes? In what ways will they be affected? And 6. To what extent can we provide benefits to the government if they adopt, use, and promote industry use of Sykes? Better data? We've got to show them how much better. More data? We've got to show them how much more significant that is. Access to data sooner? How much is that worth to them? In summary, how much better could the government plan the gyrations of the economy, or at least have some impact beyond what they have now, if they had Sykes to work with? I believe that we can prove that the benefits far outweigh the relatively insignificant expense of further research work, to be financed by the government, of course. In summary, the time is right for the emergence of a new era in the communication of economic information, an era of increased efficiency from both business and government, brought about by the availability of better, cheaper, and more abundant information. The Sykes system can pave the way for this breakthrough in conjunction with the maturing data processing capabilities at our disposal. The challenge is to create a credible working model, use it to convince the U.S. government to fund research into the most complex and detailed requirements of eventual international use of the system. When the U.S., other nations showing an interest, industry representatives, and the FASB, have agreed that the Sykes system is viable, we will enter a new era in terms of the role of accountants in society. I need your help, but if you will proceed with this idea, the Sykes system will mean more to your firm than can now be calculated. Welcome to Sykes 2, the sequel. In this presentation, various examples will be provided to clarify how Sykes works. We will get experience with reporting hierarchy level boxes, data flow channels, special business forms, currency conversion subsystems, analysis of a complex Sykes reporting example, information summarization at various hierarchy levels, and data security and confidentiality in a Sykes environment. To get the show started, we'll follow some sample information through the Sykes system, beginning at the cost center or the minor center level. The example uses 6 boxes called reporting hierarchy level boxes. Each box represents a stage in the process of data handling. As information is generated at various levels, it joins a flow of increasingly summarized data on its journey to a variety of files. A simple example would be expense data generated at a cost center, which is processed with plant data and sent to headquarters for inclusion in total company figures. These company figures are then sent to the parent company, which submits the appropriate information to a federal regional processing center, and ultimately it goes to the federal central processing center. International agencies could obtain Sykes data from the federal central processing center. We'll come back and deal with the mechanics of how the data is organized and handled a bit later. Just now, we'll examine some of the characteristics of each reporting hierarchy level box. First, the cost center, indicated in the minor center code. This is the level at which much expense and sales data will be generated. Most data at this level is hard-coded. Minor center code can be tied to an industry code. In the case of a department store, for example, each department could be a center, and sales from each department could be reported as pertaining to the appropriate industry code. The data at this level is not a balanced set of books, which may not occur until the level of company, which we'll cover shortly. Cost center data consists basically of consumption, production, and sales reports. The shop floor cost center reports its results via a form in the example here, mostly pre-coded, and upon which a foreman need only enter a few numbers. Of the open slots on this example form, the vast majority would be pre-printed and pre-coded onto the magnetic tape to the right. The use of Sykes could greatly increase the efficiency and popularity of semi-standardized business forms. Many kinds of reporting are similar across all lines of business, and business forms can reflect this if widely accepted standards are in existence. Machine and software to read the data from these forms can be more standardized too. Forms can be ordered with carefully specified code numbers and descriptions. A cross-check can be performed on numeric codes and alpha description fields to ensure accuracy at the time the forms are printed. When the forms are used, The few items which must be entered by the clerk or foreman can be added to the information on the form's magnetic tape, either by operator entry or optical scanning. The data from any given form in its entirety is then in the SEICS system. Other non-SEICS data can be recorded on the same forms, making use of the same technological sophistication to a great extent. Next, the plant, indicated in the major center code. Here, more data is added to the totals from cost center reports. Plant-level data may be a balanced set of books, but need not be. Most data is still hard-coded. Major center number can be tied to an industry code so as to report all activity for plants by industry if desired. Numbers of major center can be used as division and region indicators. And then here's another example. 3 location code systems are illustrated. The first, the basic 4-digit code, would be used by business in most of its applications. It has 1 digit for division, 1 for region, and 2 for location within division region. If this is not adequate for a very complex corporate structure, cross-reference tables can be employed to handle literally anything. Most users could probably do very nicely with the basic 4-digit code, though. The second, also 4 digits, is useful in analyzing sales and other transactions on a geographical basis. Industry and governmental groups would find this the most convenient format to use. The third format is based on tax requirements. Any 4-digit company location would have cross-reference tables linking it to a 9-digit code, providing data for city, county, and state tax information. Back to the boxes. The company headquarters unconsolidated, indicated by the company code, has a balanced set of books, except in the statistical books, which are not balanced ever. The submission of data to the Federal Regional Processing Center is prepared at the company level. Most data sought by analysts will be in the unconsolidated form. Most submissions of data to the federal facilities will be of a highly summary nature. The vast bulk of the information processed at the company level never passes to the government at all, but may be accessed from archived tapes with the companies to supply data for special analytical projects upon governmental request. The company headquarters consolidated parent, also indicated by the company code number. The parent company results are submitted exclusive of the subsidiary company results. Each company submits its data under its own company number. This eliminates many complications which would exist if parent companies were expected to handle submission of subsidiary company data under the parent company number and then split out various types of transactions which are intercompany and should be reported for one thing and not for another, and so forth. But the major account number of intercompany sales, being a 5000 series separate and distinct from the 4000 series major account number, makes analysis of intercompany transactions much more efficient. Anyway, the consolidated governmental submissions would not be of a detailed nature, rather designed to facilitate analysis of corporate, structural, financial, and power dynamics. This consolidated submission would be somewhat of a memo item, not to be commingled with unconsolidated data. Back to the boxes, we are now at the Federal Regional Processing Center, the FRPC. Data from companies is submitted here. For companies using SEICS, electronic data transmission should make periodic data remittance relatively easy. Companies not using SEICS can submit data in any form acceptable to the government at the FRPCs. At this level, another summarization of data takes place. Much information is not passed on to the Federal Central Processing Center, but resides at the Federal Regional Processing Center unless requested for some special study. The Federal Central Processing Center is responsible for the handling of data and issuance of routine reports to other governmental agencies. This is sort of a head librarian function in cases where An agency wants to do analysis on a subject which Sykes can provide data about. Providing the best data available to a user agency is the task of the Federal Central Processing Center. To do so, the Federal Central Processing Center can follow an audit trail all the way back to the archived tapes of companies in order to come up with sufficiently detailed, accurate data in instances where this has been mandated. Within each box, you can visualize a mechanism for sorting and organizing information. The matrix exists in all reporting hierarchy level boxes. These 12 formats are channels within and through which data is managed. A brief description of the internal organization is appropriate here. Inside of each reporting hierarchy level box are the 12 formats as we've just discussed. Within each format are the actual Sykes codes in varying levels of detail. Sykes records at the plant level, the major center code, would use the major and minor center segments and the major and minor account segments. By the time that data has been summarized up the line, it will be buried in with millions of similar little pieces of detail and summarized into only major account within industry. Within each of the 12 channels, information passes via the Sykes codes. In this example, an 80-digit record is illustrated. Since the Sykes code, as I've defined it, is only 49 digits long, there are plenty of available openings for other data such as record type, day, month, year, period covered, and data security level. This still leaves spaces open for more information if needed. Now, let's examine some of the notable points with respect to the code itself. At first glance, this looks very complex, but like a card game, it gets easy once you're used to it. Across the top of the illustration are symbols and names of Sykes segments as defined previously. Down the right side are levels corresponding to the 6 reporting hierarchy boxes. Note that the consolidated company level is a memo item. This example shows sales information, which would be passed to the Federal Regional Processing Center directly from the unconsolidated company level. Much of the attention of this example will be devoted to pointing out differences between the hierarchy boxes on the right there. Notice that as the level of the hierarchy becomes higher, the amount field associated with the hierarchy grows. At each successive level, the data from many individual reporting entities of one step lower are combined. For example, at the store, the major center level, all departments from within that store are combined to report total store sales. By the time we reach the Federal Central Processing Center, we may be concerned only with total U.S. retail sales. As the data is further combined and summarized, many of the Sykes segments become unnecessary for most uses. Thus, the codes in these situations are shown as blocked out in the illustration. The foreman or clerk at the department, the minor center level, doesn't need to worry about anything other than filling in amounts on forms, as we discussed before. All of the code segments for country, industry, company, accounts, and centers, and so forth are all hard-coded for this individual. At the other extreme, the analyst at the Federal Central Processing Center usually doesn't worry about more than a few codes either. These people generally wouldn't be concerned with data detailed by major and minor center, minor account, or company. As I mentioned in the first show, most people will not have to deal with more than a few Sykes code segments on a routine basis. As the data is summarized, combinations are accomplished in more than one segment. You can look at them as dimensions simultaneously. At the store, the major center level, all departments are combined to give total store sales. And in the major and minor account code segments, sales of small machine tools, the Department 1, 2, 3, 4 sales, are combined with all other types of sales from that store into hardware, consumer, or retail sales. Then, at the company level, all stores are combined into total company figures. The major and minor accounts are seen dropping yet another digit, thus combining hardware sales into total retail sales, which of course includes hardware and all other types of retail sales. Note, the major and minor account summarization in the example are pretty much parallel. The difference in this example being that one, the major account code, is uniform and predetermined by Sykes, while the other, the minor account code, is flexible and open to the individual company, except in cases where uniformity is mandated for some specific purpose. The summarization of data for most purposes on a routine basis should not obscure the fact that very detailed breakdowns of data can be possible at any reporting hierarchy level whenever necessary. If the Federal Central Processing Center so wished, and if specific codes had been required in lower-level detail reporting for the subject matter, it could access data enabling it to analyze a small machine tool, our Department 1234, sales by area of the country, industry, retail, wholesale, or mail order, company, or even store within company. The data is there, should it be needed, organized via Sykes so as to provide easy accessibility. Back to the box again. Across the top of the example box are three horizontal axis matrix elements: balance sheet, P&L, and other. Information of a normal financial statement nature is funneled into the balance sheet and P&L formats, and special data is handled by the other format. Some of the other data would be information of a more detailed nature than usual, being requested for some special purpose. You may remember the Sykes Data Category Indicator, which sorts information into four distinct sets of books. These books are illustrated, listed here, down the right side of our example box. The financial corporate books. Most data of interest to economic analysts will probably be found in this set of books. This data is merely summary-level information extracted from Sykes system major account, minor account, major and minor center codes with a data category indicator of C or B. The tax books are balanced and consist of all Category T information and Category B information. Statistics. This is not a balanced set of books. Statistics information consists of measurements of a non-currency nature. Sales figures here would indicate units sold, not dollars of sales, for example. The unit of measure Sykes code indicates whether the numbers refer to tons, man-hours, units, kilowatts, or whatever. The plan books are hypothetical financial statements for the following year. Most companies already have such books, so the Sykes version of them should entail little changeover effort. This data, summarized by industry, can be of great value to trade associations, government forecasters, and all elements of the economy, really. Of course, under no circumstances could a company's plan data be made available to its rivals. We'll have more on that later. Now we'll have to go to a more complex example format to illustrate some of the more intricate uses of Sykes. Here we will be concerned with high-level analysis by corporate and governmental users. As the orange script in the upper left corner reads, we are examining worldwide sales by a U.S. multinational corporation. Intercompany sales are from a German subsidiary, wholly owned, to the U.S. parent company. As the graphic description illustrates, A symbolizes the U.S. parent company trade sales of 70. B, the German subsidiary's domestic trade sales of 30. And C, the intercompany sales of 5 from the German subsidiary to the U.S. parent. and C situations are coded into Sykes format in the boxes on the right side of the page. Each code segment will be highlighted and its function explained as we proceed. Note the Sykes code segment names in red over the symbols on the right. The country codes, circled in green, which would be numeric in reality, indicate very simply the country in which the company reporting is located. The major account code segment, in purple, in the sales section, the 4 and 5,000 series major account section of the P&L, can use the minor account segment as a product code symbol. But in the owner's equity section of the balance sheet, the 3,000 series major account numbers, the minor account code indicates country of ownership and whether the company is a parent or a subsidiary company or a branch or whatever. Situations where multiple owners of diverse nationalities exist can be handled via a subsystem designed to provide adequate information to those who monitor international trade and investment. Industry codes should be uniform across countries, with a range of flexible values open to each country for exception situations. Also, as stated in the first presentation, a range of industry numbers should be reserved for miscellaneous, all other, small industry indicators. Data category is a B in this case, since sales information is not different for book and tax purposes. These symbols should be uniform internationally. When sales major accounts, the 4 and 5,000 series major account numbers, are reported, the major center number, in orange here, indicates the company location responsible for the sales. The destination of sales is recorded in the minor center, in green. In this example, I have used one alpha character to indicate foreign or domestic, another 3 numeric characters to elaborate on where, domestically or internationally, the sales went. The German intercompany sales, the 5,000 series major account code, for example, to the U.S. have a minor center indicator for foreign sales to the USA. A denomination amount field records the numbers of dollars or marks or whatever currency is involved, as defined in the next segment, the Unit of Denomination code. In the area of the Unit of Denomination segment, Sykes opens up an exciting door. U.S. domestic sales, as you can see, are denominated in U.S. dollars, and German domestic sales in Deutschmarks. This is how it would normally be. But the sales from Germany to the U.S. can be denominated in either dollars or Deutschmarks or in any other major currency desired. With the organizational power of Sykes making software design so much easier, standardized subsystems will be brought into existence and will be used, enabling sales and purchases, lending and borrowing, and various other types of transactions involving potentially different currencies to be booked within balanced books in any currency for which the system has regularly updated conversion tables. Exchange gain-loss can be tracked and reported automatically with system-generated entries provided on request. Back to the illustration. We'll conclude with the data type segment, which is a single digit, and in this case, since we're looking at a piece of code with a sales major account code, the code indicates a C for a credit balance. And that is the conclusion of that example. Now, the subject of data security is both sensitive and important. Upon initial exposure to a Sykes presentation, some people may react by fearing that company secrets will be more accessible to outsiders because the company chart of accounts will be very similar to other companies' charts of accounts, and if people can gain access to your database, they can find their way around in it more easily. And secondly, more company data will be available to outsiders in a Sykes situation. More data will be useful to the government and industry analysts. But The facts of this situation are that 1. Security is superior in more organized environments, all other things being equal. Thus, unauthorized information theft can be more effectively combated in a better organized system. Entire new information security systems are likely to emerge with SEICS, leading to overall improvements in data security. Secondly, data requested by outsiders, the government and industry associations and so forth, under SEICS is not different in nature than the data requested now. Confidential data will still be accessible only with a court order. Confidential data will not be accessible otherwise. The nature of the data code used to store and transmit data does not affect the legal principles which determine confidentiality of information. There is no doubt that data security is an issue, but with appropriate efforts, a SEICS system can protect sensitive data at least as well as the best systems do currently. This concludes the SEICS 2 presentation. Thank you again for your time and attention.